You have reached 6 calls. If you want to tell us your story, please leave a message after the beep.
Well, I started getting involved with disability right about when my child was about 9 months, a bit earlier, when she started showing signs of developmental delay, and we more or less had an idea that she was going to be diagnosed with some sort of disorder, disability. So very early on there were some signs that she was probably going to be diagnosed with autism. So that's when we kind of got introduced to the world of disability, and she was subsequently diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 18 months. And since then I've been pretty active in the world of disability and disability rights. Once I was given the news, it was a struggle to sometimes get her seen too quickly, to insist that, well, you've told me this, now I want her to get the early intervention that she needs, because if we know that something is wrong, we want her to be given the best possible chance in life. So, you know, it is proven, and research shows that early intervention is what is effective and what works with these children. And then to obviously, for her to be given the support that she needs and the early intervention that she needs to give her the best possible chance in the future. And obviously the support that she gets has come and does come at a great cost and expense to us privately, financially, because most of it is done across the border in Spain.
My son was born in 1988, and he's the fourth one of my 4 children. And at the time, you were offered your ultrasounds in the UK, but not in Gibraltar. There was no way for me to find out about my son because there wasn't any tests available at the time. We're talking 33 years ago. He was 33 on the 6th of August this year. So I went through a normal pregnancy, and at the 8-month point, I actually went to my brother's wedding and went into labour straight after the reception. So my son was born the following day, and when my son was born, there was something about him that didn't seem right. And I can't explain what it is or what it was, but the whole room went very quiet. The midwives just looked at each other, and there was this sort of face, this sort of look that made me think there's something wrong with my son, but I didn't really know what it was. So obviously then my husband was taken to a room or to the office and was told that they thought that my son had the signs or the features of a baby with Down syndrome, but they needed a doctor to confirm.
I have 3 children, the youngest of which was diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, when he was around 2 years old. How it came about was he was a very happy little child, very connected, and then when he was around 18 months, the few words that he had, he started to lose them. He stopped speaking, essentially. Till then, he had been a, quote unquote, normal little boy. He had met all his milestones, he was very happy, very engaged, as I say, and then suddenly something changed. He just became a different child, which was obviously hugely upsetting. And I had a great pediatrician who sort of took me down this road and said, well, I think you need to check a few of these things out. And we did. We went to London and had a multidisciplinary assessment there, and we also had a multidisciplinary assessment with the GHA here in Gibraltar, and they confirmed it was autism.
I realized at, say, about 8-9 months that her development wasn't a typical development. I already had an older child, and obviously I had something to compare with. And the milestones that my older daughter had met when she had to meet them, Meaden was not meeting, and obviously her development wasn't what you would call a typical neurotypical development. And so there was already some signs there that as a mother and as a parent, are not what you expect of a developing child. So there were flags that, especially with her social interaction, there were some flags with her mobility that thankfully then they sorted themselves out. It was just a delay, but there were flags there that caused alarm bells to start ringing.
I've always been surrounded by deafness because my dad has always suffered with hearing. When I had faith, the last thing I expected was to have a hearing deficient child. I think the first inkling was when she was about 18 months, when they do the hearing test, the little hearing test they do in the health center. And it didn't quite look to me as if she actually looked when they rang the little bell. She just felt a presence at the back. But obviously being a first-time mom, you think, I'm being too exaggerated.
Very strange feeling. I cannot, it was really strange. It was like you were detached. It was like you were seeing it, but you weren't there. I suppose probably shock of something happening to you that's different, that's not the norm. You've already had 3 children that are healthy, and you see the happy faces, and you weren't seeing any of that, but you weren't quite understanding why. In my mind, it was because we had had a hectic week with the wedding, and maybe I was tired and I couldn't work out what was going on, but deep down I knew something was wrong. So maybe 2 hours later, the doctor comes in, and I'm in the ward, and the doctor calls me to come in and see him and gives me the news, gives my husband and myself the news that obviously they have to do the tests, but they have to send the tests to the UK, and that I think it was at the time, it was 6 weeks before results would come back. And I thought to myself, this is a mistake. This cannot be happening to me. This happens to everybody else. So this isn't me. This is a complete mistake. So that's with the mentality that you wait your 6 weeks, hoping that it's going to come back as a mistake. But when you go home, you realize that the features are there, that the differences are there, and that actually the likelihood is that the results are going to be positive.
She came to nursery, she started to go to school, and her primary school teacher, a lovely woman, she told me, Damien, I think you should take Faith to maybe a speech therapist. She like eased me into it, no? Because she has a lisp, but she shouts a lot in class as well. When she talks, she has a very loud tone. So I took her advice. This was Mrs. Byrne in St. Paul's. I took her advice. We took her to a speech therapist to see about her lisp. Something normal, as I was told. So because of the shouting, I was referred to the audiologist, who couldn't find anything wrong. So we left it there. We took her again because she kept telling me, I've got a bee in my ear. Mom, can you hear the bee in my ear? No, darling, I can't hear the bee if it's in your ear. There's a bee. And we spent so many times, because she was so convinced that, there was a bee in the house. So we kept looking for a bee in the house. Darling, there's no bee, but I can hear a bee. So we took her back, and he insisted that there was nothing wrong. seeing that this was not normal, when you get that little tingling feeling, there's something not quite right here. I took her to a private audiologist, hoping that my daughter would cooperate, because in all honesty, she wouldn't. She was a shy child with strangers, and she did. And that's the first time that I heard, your daughter has tinnitus and your daughter has hearing loss.
A diagnosis helps them know what is happening to their child. With a diagnosis comes the library of information tagged to a diagnosis that's been achieved over a lot of time. And once you've got that background information, you're better able to understand what you've got in front of you, and you're better able to then predict what might happen in the future. You're better able to prognosticate. And with prognosis and an understanding of the future, you're better able to plan services to support this child with special needs, because the child with special needs will get there. He or she will have those additional needs. And it's down to us, with the information at hand, with a diagnosis, to look forwards and to make that journey, that special needs journey, as easy as possible and as stress-free as we possibly can. It's a journey, it's a process. It's a process from when you have a newborn baby in front of you, all your hopes and aspirations you have for your newborn child.
The moment that she was diagnosed, obviously it's a moment, I can only describe it, and many parents that I speak to describe the same feeling. You sort of grieve, and you grieve. You have to come to terms with the idea of the child that you thought you were going to have, because nobody expects or thinks that you are going to have a child with a disability. And it's not that you love your child any less, because I love my daughters both equally, and they're both as special, and they're both blessings to me. But you grieve the idea of the child that you were going to have, and you come to terms with the child that you have. So it's a grieving process that you go through, and then you adapt to your new world. But it's obviously a process that parents need to go through, and it's a process that mentally is quite hard for parents, and a process that I think parents do need a lot of support for, and there should be a lot more psychological support for parents that go through that process. Bear in mind that whilst a child is getting diagnosed, parents are very lost throughout that process. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of mental issues that parents go through, and there's very little support to help those parents.
You don't really understand what's going to happen. You've sort of given a diagnosis, and in Gibraltar you kind of sent off and said, and told to go away and research it, and you're then sort of left by yourself trying to figure out what your child needs, how to get it for your child, and trying to navigate it all. So it's difficult. It was a very difficult period.
You want answers. You want answers to make sure that you're doing all you can for this little new life in front of you. So when you have this child with difficulties, getting the answers, getting the help and support required, be it therapy, be it health intervention, and some things can be improved. The earlier we are able to achieve a diagnosis, the earlier we're able to input into the difficulties set. The earlier we can understand and predict, the better we're able to support this child with special needs and the family. And it's not just about the child's potential academic achievement, no. It's not just about the child's health possibilities. It's about the whole family's ability to enjoy this life journey with a child with special needs. And remember, it's not about the child only. It's about the child and the parents and the child's siblings and the bigger family and the whole community. So early diagnosis, early intervention, and we are then able to somewhat guarantee a less stressful journey ahead.
There's a before and after. It's a very interesting thing that happens psychologically. Well, it happened to me. There's a before your son is born and an after. Because before, everything was normal, in inverted commas, and suddenly your life changes. And you do not realize, or you don't know, and the fear of the unknown, and the impact of something different that you're not ready, you're not prepared for, that you haven't prepared for that. And you've got other children to look after as well. So I had a 6-year-old at the time, I had a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. We had just come back from the UK because I'd been away studying, and we were living in La Linea, waiting for vineyards to be built. There was no housing possibilities for us at the time. So I was in La Linea. So I was stuck there in La Linea with the 4 children. And I can only remember it being very, very daunting and very scary.
In Eden's case, she was picked up quite early. The initial way in which perhaps the news was given to me, I think could have been delivered in perhaps a better way, in terms of with a bit of more psychological support. I think some counselling would have been offered. I think I had a very traumatic experience to the point where I to this day find it very hard to step into the CHC, Children's Health Centre, where I was given the news. Because the way I was given the news was just alone without my husband, just with my child in the first instance, the first time that they suspected something might be wrong with her. And it was very at 9 o'clock in the morning, we think that she has this, we think that she has that. And for me it was a traumatic experience, to the point that I find it hard to go back to that place. So I think that needs to be more support for parents, because it's very hard.
At the beginning, we just were all over the place because no one came to us and said, you know, your child has been diagnosed with ASD, and this is everything you need to know. This is what the state is going to provide for him. This is his therapy. This is, you know, these are all the passes that you need. This is, you know, the one form that you have to fill out in order to gain whatever it is that your child needs. That didn't happen. There's no one department sort of came flying in and said, you know, here we are to the rescue. That's not what happens. So initially, my son was in speech and language therapy, and I've got to say right off that therapists are great. There's just not enough of them. But he was being given some speech and language therapy, and so from there, the speech and language therapist put me in contact with the pediatrician at the time, Dr. Dai, who's no longer with us, but she's the one that sort of gave him the diagnosis. After that, I was given a short amount of sessions of occupational therapy, and that was pretty much it. So he's continued with his speech and language therapy for up till now, but it's very limited. So a child like him who's non-verbal, he should be getting a vast amount of speech and language therapy, obviously, because he can't speak and he needs to learn how to speak, and he needs a therapist to help him do that. But he gets sort of a short period of time where he gets 1 session a week, which again he should be getting, you know, every day. And then when those sessions are over, they move on to someone else. They move on to another child that needs therapy, and he's left waiting until they come back to him. So the initial thing that I had to deal with was getting him therapy. Like, obviously, like most parents, we went straight onto the internet. We realized that what he needed was therapy, and so we went about trying to get him some therapy. We quickly understood that the GHA wasn't able to provide what he needed, and so we tried to go the private route. In Gibraltar, there's even privately very limited amount of therapy, so we had to go over the border. And I've just spent the last couple of years basically taking him every day across the border to therapy centre in Spain. There's a fantastic early intervention centre called Asansul just over the border in La Linea, which is so ironic because they have everything. They have occupational therapy, speech therapy, psychologists. They have it all under one roof, and you go there and your child gets the therapy he needs. Obviously we need to pay for it because we're not resident in Spain, but it's so ironic for me that in the sort of perceived low income or poor La Linea across the border, they have this fantastic centre, and they have more than one. They have a few, and in Gibraltar we don't have that. I mean, it's tragic really when you think about it.
You ready, Carla? Yeah.
Sí. STXBP1, it's a rare genetic disorder. STXBP1, it's the name of the gene that suffers the mutation or the error, and essentially it affects 1 in 30,000 individuals. So no, Alaya was the unlucky one of the genetic lottery here in Gibraltar.
Yeah. Alaya was developing normally, and she was on the one word stage. We realized that Alaya, obviously she took a bit of time to start walking. She was a bit delayed on that. But we noticed that she regressed on her speech. So on one of our checkups, on our 18 months checkup, we took her in, and I obviously told Dr. Vassallo at the time that I could see she had a regression, and she wouldn't bend her knees. She used to have these tremors, and she obviously referred Alaya straight away to see an OT, a speech and language therapist, and the physio. When Alaya was assessed, we were told Alaya had a global developmental delay with an ataxia, which was a word I've never heard in my life, an ataxia.
Ataxia basically affects her motor skills. She has tremors. She has a difficulty controlling her fine motor skills, and obviously in the worst case scenarios it can affect the swallowing and can lead to severe health conditions.
Yeah.
But in her case, sort of the ataxia that she has is just her gross and fine motor skills.
Yeah. When we see the cases, when we started researching the STXBP1, we ourselves thought we were lucky because Alaya was able to walk. She was mobile, she is verbal, although she cannot have a conversation like the one we're having at the moment, but she is quite verbal, and she makes her needs being understood. If she wants a drink, she'll tell you. If she wants a toilet, she'll tell you. If she's hungry, she'll tell you. When we balance the cases, other cases, we think we've been lucky. We've been lucky, obviously.
Compared to other condition, you mean?
Yeah, to other children with the same condition, or young adults, yeah.
Our concerns began when she wasn't meeting her milestones, and obviously because she was our first child, we didn't have anything that we could compare her against. But when we had our second child, Callum, it was obvious that she was different, no?
Yeah. I grieved. It was like when somebody.
See, you can't
grieve.
prepare for it. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, you grieve. We were all our dreams were shattered. Because you can imagine you're having like this little perfect family, and all of a sudden, it's all your dreams are like they're
So
like
you-
taken away from you. It's like building this
you
perfect
feel-
sandcastle, and all of a sudden somebody comes and walks all over it, and that's it. So
You feel lost.
yeah, lost. We felt lost. I grieved. I remember being like not feeling myself for a year and a half. It felt like a passing when somebody passes and you have to go through this grieving process. That's how I felt. I was like in denial as well, because you don't want your child, your perfect child.
There's a lot of denial at first,
Yeah.
and then gradually you accept it, but you feel helpless.
We didn't know where to turn to. We didn't know what we were expecting. We didn't know what was coming. Basically, we were living our days like day by day. We couldn't plan anything ahead.
Yeah. You can't really take it any other way than taking it
Yeah,
step
day by
at
day,
a
and
time,
then-
day by day.
Yeah, and the journey began.
Obviously,
Yeah.
something's not working right, so you know there's got to be a source to that problem.
Yeah.
That's why we keep on pushing for tests to get to the closure on the whole situation.
Yeah.
Even though the diagnosis helps, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
At some stage, no, even if we never got to that, getting that diagnosis, you have to sort of think, when are we going to stop? Because essentially, even if you have the diagnosis, is it going to resolve anything at the end of the day?
Yeah, but
Because
yeah,
no, because the treatment is going to be the same.
same.
It's
Yeah,
gonna
it
be
doesn't
therapy.
change anything. Yeah, it
It's
doesn't
not-
change anything.
yeah.
The only thing is that you know what's wrong with your child, and obviously as parents,
Yeah.
it's like closure. Yeah, it's
No, ultimately,
an acceptance as well. No.
if it weren't because if it weren't for the diagnosis, we wouldn't get into contact with the other groups who do have a similar condition. And obviously, a lot of the groundwork is done there. They already have the experience, so they know what works, what doesn't, and
Yeah.
that's really where we get the guidance and the knowledge from the groups on social media that parents of children with similar the same condition.